ain't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's your boy Ernie the Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Also, if you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap that notification bell. That way you don't miss any more awesome videos like this one. And also, make sure you hit that like button because it ensures that YouTube will show you even more of my videos and even maybe other videos like mine, even if they aren't me. You never know. You might open yourself up to a world you never knew existed. Not to mention it's free. Doesn't cost you a thing. So go ahead. Hit that button. Anyway, we're going to be talking about NYX number 3, written by Jackson Lanzig and Colleen Kelly, as well as art provided by Francesco Morderino, as well as colors by Raul Angelo, as well as letters by Joe Sabino. Okay, so this book is heralding the return of the Morlocks, and I know what you're probably thinking. The Morlocks never left, and this is kind of why this is as interesting as it is, and also why it might be kind of weird to anyone who hasn't been keeping up or hasn't read some of the greater like House of X Krakoa era stuff. What you kind of need to know, and if you weren't reading the Hellion series, I would forgive you for not knowing why this is as or maybe as not big of a deal as you may or may not think it is. It's because during the Krakoan era, while yes, we saw characters like Callisto hanging out on Krakoa. If you were reading the I guess like it was the Jerry Duggan Marauder series, you would see other Morlocks centric characters show up here and there. You see Caliban show up here and there in other places, like in the Jerry Duggan X-Men book. But it was actually both in the Marauder series and the Hellion series where it was revealed Morlocks do not live on Krakoa, at least not the Morlocks proper. Now, I know what a lot of you are probably thinking. You're probably thinking to yourself, well, wait a minute, isn't a Morlock a mutant who can't pass for human? Yes and no, but what I'm actually talking about here is the actual social group, the Morlocks. The reason why all this is kind of a big deal and also kind of weird in some spots is because it was revealed early on during the House of X era in Marauders number 7. Morlocks as a whole actually did not live on Krakoa, and it was largely due to some things that were actually expounded upon in Hellions, when it was revealed that the Morlocks discovered that the OG Marauders, the very same Marauders responsible for the mutant massacre where countless Morlocks were put to the sword by Mr. Sinister's Marauders, and they just didn't care for the prospect of sharing sacred land with that particular group of people. It would be no different than expecting someone whose family was completely massacred by somebody, expecting them to welcome that same person into their home and act as if nothing ever happened between them. It would be weird. Point of the matter is, this was expected, and the Morlocks, as a result, they didn't want to deal with that. So a lot of them left for Rio Verde, which was a little bit of a retirement community in Arizona. A lot of Morlocks lived there, in that time frame, and some even migrated to Madripoor when mutants had put more of a foothold in Madripoor a little later in the Krakoan era. And then, when Madripoor kind of fell apart and that was no longer a viable option, many Morlocks lived on the high seas using a boat, not the Marauder as what was used in the Marauder series, but something along the same lines. They all lived on a boat and basically just kind of kept to themselves. We really didn't even see a lot of what was going on with the Morlocks unless you read Dark X-Men or maybe one of the random X-Men Infinity comics. Like, it was the only place you were going to get this information, and it was not something that was very widely talked about. So the idea that Caliban and a couple of other characters, actually some other characters that are reintroduced to us. I know some people might look at some of these characters and think that they are new, but the young lady pictured here, Lulo, is actually from X-Men Red. She was one of the Iraqi mutants who Storms, I don't know if they're still dating, I assume they're still dating, but Craig of NASA, he was the one who protected Lulo and her brother Cobb. And Lulo, while we haven't seen Cobb, Lulo is definitely here. And she's grown up a little bit too. Like, she's not this, like, when we first met her, she was much more childlike, almost like she was not more than 8, 9, maybe 10 years old. Here, she looks like she's damn near a teenager. So that just kind of has shown you that the passage of time that has happened here, more or less, even though really not that much time should have passed at all. But that's another story altogether. Might be part of her mutation, who knows, because we don't really even know what her powers are, even though not really here to talk about that. Point of the matter is, we also know that Summoner of the Depths, one of the leaders of Arakko prior to its fall from grace, he is also present as well, and he has a lot to answer for as well. But while he didn't live on Earth as a Morlock, he lived on Arakko as a proud mutant. And what's kind of happening here is that Caliban is taking some of the best parts, or what he felt were the best parts of Krakoa, and you're kind of marrying that ideal with what Summoner loved about Arakko, and everybody kind of bringing these things together. We're taking Iraqi refugees and Krakoan refugees and kind of melding ideologies. And we see that when they are all coming together over the death of a young mutant, someone who was very likely killed by the Purifiers, who do make a return here in this issue, it becomes very obvious that, you know, some of those practices, the way that Caliban memorializes Shay, the young mutant who was killed, that is something that is very much reminiscent of House of X, calling out what was he, who was he, and referring to him as mutant and proud, and and then the whole talk about how, oh well, how did mutants eulogize their dead during the Krakoan era, and Anole even bringing up the point that we didn't, because we had resurrection. So mutants dying now is a very weird custom, because now they have to go back to mourning the dead as opposed to celebrating their rebirth, which I think is actually something a lot of people missed about the Krakoan era, when you would hear these constant complaints about resurrection and so on and so forth. It was one of those things I always thought was kind of silly. It's like, well, yeah, you still remember your death because you died. You had to experience it on some level. So yeah, it was always one of those things. It was a lot more than just your typical superhero die, superhero come back business. It was meant to be a slap in the face of all the countless and senseless deaths that mutants had suffered at the hands of humanity. And here we're now back to having to accept that as a reality. It sucks. It sucks. A lot of the commentary here about the death of Shay is pretty reminiscent of a lot of things that are happening in the real world. Some things that honestly I would be a little too depressed to talk about right now, especially considering some things that have quite literally happened just in the past 24 hours, I think, at the time of this video's recording. So yeah, it's crazy stuff, man. It's crazy stuff. That said, what I like about this is that the Morlocks, as they're reintroduced here, they're a little militant, maybe more so than what we might be used to, but also at the same time, they're not trying to be the X-Men. They're not trying to replace the X-Men. What they're trying to do is they are trying to create a community where they can be themselves. They don't have to live in the sewers, but they can live wherever they want. That's kind of the mission statement of the new Morlocks. They basically want to live wherever they want, as free as they want, without having to hide who they are and without having to fear being attacked or bullied, or even in the case of characters like Shay in this issue, killed. So yeah, this is kind of where they're at right now. And why I always go back to the fact that NYX is not a teen book. It's about people just trying to exist. And that's something that Anole talks about. The fact that, yeah, he used to be an X-Man, but he's not an X-Man anymore. He's gone past that. He's just wanting to be himself. He just wants to be left alone. He wants to be able to live his life and not have to worry about trying to save the world, despite the fact that his instincts always push him to act when the chips are down. And that's what kind of makes him perfect for these new Morlocks. I want to believe that there's nothing shady going on here, because Caliban doesn't even try to indoctrinate Anole in any of this. He just says, no, we don't think you're an X-Man. We just want you to be who you are. And if what you want to be is with us, then you're with us. If you don't want to be here, you are free to leave. But they don't want to be another X-Men. They're not trying to be some kind of a strike force. They're trying to be a community that stands up for each other, which in a lot of cases makes them very similar to what we've seen in X Factor with the Mutant Underground. Almost kind of seems, I don't want to say unnecessary, almost seems unnecessary though to have two completely different groups, especially considering there's Morlocks, or people who would be considered Morlocks amongst the Mutant Underground. It almost seems like a waste to have two completely different groups doing this, but at the same time, this is supposed to be a fractured era, so it actually does make more sense to have multiple groups, I guess, if you want to have that sort of thing. The Purifiers, as I mentioned earlier, they are also back. And for those unfamiliar, the Purifiers are, for all intents and purposes, the anti-mutant version of the Proud Boys. Basically what they are, they have been in the game, to my understanding, since 1982, making their debut in X-Men God Loves, Man Kills alongside William Stryker. So yeah, they look a little different here. Like, honestly, when I initially saw them, until they actually said that they were the Purifiers, I was under the assumption they were the Sapien League having returned, or just some new anti-mutant outfit. But no, this is who they are. They are the Purifiers, and their entire MO is to wipe out mutant kind. Full stop. And while they are unsuccessful in this attempt, it doesn't mean that they won't be back to do it again. But what I love about this comic is that it talks a great deal about how, as someone who is a part of a marginalized community, how you are treated versus how you want to be treated, and that there is no monolith for mutant kind, which is very similar to some things you might hear people say in the very really real world, that there is, well, a lot of people like to refer to black people as being of one hive mind, as being a monolith. It's not true, and it's not true of any other social, ethnic, or any other group otherwise. None of that matters. Like, everyone has the ability to think for themselves, and while yes, there is a capacity for people to have, of a certain group, whether it's ethnic or otherwise, to have very similar opinions, it doesn't mean that everyone thinks the same thing. Not every mutant is an X-Man, no differently than every black person is super hyper religious. It doesn't matter what acronym or what set of letters you use to describe someone in shorthand. That does not necessarily mean that there's a hive mind amongst them all. And that's kind of what the whole talk here is. And also how you combat bigotry. There's the conflicting of ideals, where Laura wants to handle things one way, Sophie wants to handle them a different way, Kamala wants to handle them a different way. It just really depends on how you want to tackle that situation. And everybody has a different opinion about what should be done about how mutants are being treated. The Morlocks have their own ideology in regards to that as well. But at the end of the day, I like what this is setting up. It's setting up some pretty cool and interesting stuff. Just the idea that the Morlocks are back and are being, treated as a serious entity, not something that like gets forgotten about until it's convenient later, which, to be fair, there's plenty of time for that to happen. Could happen again. But I like the idea of the Morlocks being less a downtrodden group and more a group that is seen as people who are trying to just make their place in the world, not just accept that they were given a lower one. That's actually, I think, a pretty big status quo change. And I don't know if it'll stick, but it's cool to see. I'll take it. Also, it's nice to see some characters we don't get to see a lot of anymore, like case in point. While I'm not 100% certain that this is the case, but there's a character in the background who looks a lot like Maggot. Even though technically his skin color might be a little off to some people, just it's actually a little bit lighter than it would normally be, and it's not the kind of blue-black that he is sometimes, but that is almost close to the color he was back when he was like, kind of first making the rounds. He did still have like the blue-black coloring, but that was something that kind of came and went depending on the situation. It was all basically like when his powers were being used or whatever. But you see Eeny and Meeny, so I mean, that's something. I think that's cool. I wish they maybe put a little bit more, maybe can I just get a crumb more melanin on him, just saying. But anyway, that said, I thought this was cool. That was cool. NYX is doing what it's got to do. And I think that this is kind of, once again, it's not, House of X #1. It's not House of X #2. And it ain't gonna be. But I think that what they're doing, each of these books is telling a story. I think that's more important than trying to wow everyone with some crazy crossover, which don't worry, you're getting a crossover soon. Now, I have a video that I'll probably be putting out here for too long talking about it. I've been really yeah, we'll see. Yeah, there's a lot going on here. We'll get to it. I promise. We'll get to it.